Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I'll review today is The End of the Affair. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of The End of the Affair with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. The End of the Affair is a 1951 novel by the famous 20th century English writer Greene. There isn't much more I can say about Greene I haven't said before in the reviews of his other books. He's one of the most popular English writers of the 20th century, somewhat commercial, but at the same time there is a lot of depth in the characters he created. Maybe because, to a different extent, they all were reflection of him, connected to his personal struggles and demons, especially when dealing with one's faith and beliefs. Many of his books have been successfully adapted into films. What is The End of the Affair about? The novel is about complexities of love and faith, especially when the two are in conflict. It is about religious faith crisis caused by adulterous adventure, being torn between physical love for a person and somewhat divine, even unconditional love for God. People go on loving God, don't they, all their lives without seeing Him. This is the line that I found most memorable. It seems to create doubt, a question whether love based on physical presence is nothing more than a selfish feeling, a product of our ego. A bit of the plot. The plot takes place in London during World War II, and it revolves around an affair between a married woman, Sarah, and a writer named Bendrix. The other characters are Sarah's husband, Henry, Richard Smythe, who is a Catholic priest, and to a smaller extent, private detective named Perkis, and his teenage son, Lance. Bendrix is in love with Sarah, but is tormented by insecurities and jealousy, and feels that because of the intensity of his feelings, the affair is coming to its end. And it does, kind of like a self-fulfilling premonition caused by accidental explosion, which makes Sarah choose between God and happiness. Bendrix is tormented by the question of why the affair ended and comes to the conclusion it must have been caused by another man. And to obtain some kind of proof and possible closure, he hires a private detective to follow Sarah around. The detective's discoveries confirm some of Bendrix's suspicions, but not in the way he imagined them. And in the end, it is Bendrix who must face his own religious crisis and make amends to be able to continue. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about The End of the Affair? The book seems more personal than the other Greene's novels I read, more autobiographical, inspired by his own experiences. Many of his novels are based on his life, even if he occasionally denies it, but this one seems to go deeper, read a lot like a confession. Seems Greene liked seducing married or taken women, at least the idea of it, and it is present in many of the novels he wrote. But The End of the Affair is also more of a sentimental, even religious confession, about a crisis not caused by age, but by a romantic experience. Rather than being driven by the plot, the novel is more of a reflection on fate and the morality behind right and wrong. Maybe even questions what is more important, physical and bodily, or spiritual and intangible. Bendrix is a writer, kind of like Greene himself, working on a novel about the end of love. Maybe that was supposed to be the title of the book, but then he probably realized love doesn't end. It just transfers to another person or even object. And sometimes it just goes to sleep, but any movement in our lives can waken it. Because we don't control love, nobody does, it just exists on its own terms as the sentimental side of our lives. Insecurity is the worst sense that lovers feel. Sometimes the most humdrum, desireless marriage seems better. Insecurity twists meanings and poisons trust. The best we can do is probably try to restrain some of the reactions, give up on the impossible to achieve effort to control it, and just roll with the punches. The end of the affair is about love and also hate. The two are inseparable companions competing for power. Greene makes sure we know that novel is about love and hate, probably so we don't treat it as some kind of tragic love story, even though that's what it is. If hate is not too large a term to use in relation to any human being, I hated Henry. I hated his wife Sarah too. And he, I suppose, came soon after the events of that evening to hate me, as he surely at times must have hated his wife and that other, in whom in those days we were lucky enough not to believe. So this is a record of hate far more than of love. But all this hate claimed by Bendrix seems pretty superficial. He's trying to convince himself he hates all those people so he doesn't have to face how he really feels about them, in order not to suffer. Bendrix resents Sarah for religious awakening because he feels it is taking her away from him, and because of it the only real hate seems to be directed at God, for what allegedly God has done to him. He comes to the conclusion it was God who took Sarah away from him twice, which is kind of paradox since Bendrix insists he doesn't believe in God, his existence. Oh God, you've done enough. You've robbed me of enough. I'm too tired and old to learn to love. Leave me alone forever. Of course, it is difficult to hate somebody you don't have strong feelings about, even more so somebody you don't believe is real. So Bendrix struggles with how he really feels about God. He becomes jealous and angry, and it becomes the driving force behind his actions. Another strong feeling present connected to the others is betrayal, or the sense of it, which often turns love to hate. Bendrix feels betrayed, so he wants to hate, but regardless of how hard he tries, he is not able to do it, and his love doesn't turn to hate. It's always present, just goes from happiness into unhappiness. So it is those two alternating states, always present and depending on the circumstances, our own interpretation of them, one is always more visible than the other. They are very temporary, but at the same time always present. They might be even parallel to love and hate. Happiness seems unreal because it makes us feel insecure about its inevitable coming end, just like it does Bendrix. We feel as the happiness is not ours, present. They might be even parallel to love and hate. Happiness seems unreal because it makes us feel insecure about its inevitable coming end, just like it does Bendrix. We feel as the happiness is not ours, but a state shared with others, even dependent on the other. On the other hand, unhappiness seems so much more personal since we can only feel the pain individually. The sense of unhappiness is so much easier to convey than that of happiness. In misery, we seem aware of our own existence, even though it may be in the form of a monstrous egotism. This pain of mine is individual, this nerve that winces belongs to me and to no other. But happiness annihilates us. We lose our identity. I read somewhere that the only time we are aware of ourselves is not in the cards I think therefore I am, but when we suffer. The pain and intensity make us aware of our existence. Also, when we are unhappy, we search for answers, reflect and analyze, trying to understand what happened. We naturally become introspective. We can see it in Bendrix, the efforts and length he goes through to get some answers to understand what happened. While in happiness, we usually exist in a somewhat superficial state, maybe even take its existence for granted. And further, love that is supposed to make us happy sometimes is not enough, It often brings pain, so the natural instinct is to sacrifice it. It was as though our love were a small creature caught in a trap and bleeding to death. I had to shut my eyes and wring its neck. Now, putting to the side all the talk about love and hate, and all the other feelings caused by it and relate to it, I think the more important theme of the novel is faith, religious, based on one's relationship with God. The religious crisis of Sarah and later Bendrix, separate but one feeding of the other. Sarah is a wife of a public servant in a sexless marriage of convenience based on psychological dependency but lacking physical attraction. So she feels unsatisfied and incomplete and searches for what's missing and seems to find it in Bendrix. Of course, she knows what she's doing is wrong, wrong in the sense of being against moral values of our Western Christian beliefs, and eventually she is tested through her love for Bendrix, when she has to choose between happiness and God. Choosing God offers Sarah a chance at redemption, but she comes to the conclusion it is too difficult, and she is afraid she won't be able to stick to it. She often mentions being lost in the desert, that's what her life feels like it, and she compares her suffering to it. We were not in touch, in the same desert, seeking the same waterholes perhaps, but out of sight, always alone, for it wouldn't be a desert if we were together. And she wonders where the relief, the water, will come from, God or Bendrix. I walked under your windows in the rain, and I wanted to wait under them all night, only to show that after all I might learn to love. And I wasn't afraid of the desert any longer, because you were there. Sarah is probably relieved when the choice is made for her, when she gets sick. She might even believe it is God who is trying to save her, make her suffering easier. And this probably makes her faith in God even stronger, confirming she made the right choice. As I mentioned before, during her spiritual awakening, Sarah had occasional doubts about the choice she made, and in order to get some confirmation and relief, she sought a Catholic priest, Father Smith. But unfortunately for her, he was willing to compromise his own faith to be with her. And this left her more confused and further questioning if she made the right decision. Bendrix is somewhat of a victim of Sarah's spiritual crisis, and he blames God while trying to convince himself God doesn't exist. But eventually, it is his hate that makes him into a believer, since you cannot hate something that doesn't exist. I hate you, God. I hate you as though you actually existed. Bendrix's hate for God is brought by fear that his obsessive, selfish love, driven by need to possess and materialized in jealousy and anger, cannot compete with the unconditional feeling for God Sarah's love is transforming into, spurred by her feelings of guilt to which he contributed. Bendrix wonders if Sarah could love Father Smith, whose one side of the face is deformed, which is comparable to the unconditional love one feels for God or child. All this struggle and suffering Bendrix is going through is brought by his own insecurities and doubts about love, probably even feeling undeserving of it. It's a strange thing to discover and to believe that you are loved when you know that there is nothing in you for anybody but a parent or a God to love. There is also the relationship between Bendrix and Henry, first as competitors, but later brought together as friends, united by the love they felt for Sarah. And the story seems to culminate in forgiveness from the all involved. Well, for Bendrix, it might be more of an acceptance, accepting that God exists, even though he doesn't agree with him. Bendrix doesn't want to believe in God because for him God is somebody who created so much suffering in his own life and the others. Greene also seems to underline the difference between man's and woman's love, For men, it is more physical, based on contact and presence, and initially this gives Bendrix some confidence in his competition with God. I could even look with charity towards the altar and the figure dangling there. She loves us both, I thought, but if there is to be a conflict between an image and a man, I know who will win. I could put my hand on her thigh or my mouth on her breast. He was imprisoned behind the altar and couldn't move to plead his case. But unfortunately, women feel love a bit differently, with fewer conditions, probably influenced by the motherly instinct. And God has some surprises prepared for people who want to compete with him. To sum it up, The End of the Affair is a great novel, maybe one of Greene's best. It is a profound exploration of human nature and its different sides: love, fate, jealousy, betrayal, and desire. The prose is beautiful, poetic, and deep in the English way, practical and sincere, allowing to go deep without drifting into illusions. Greene shows the intensity of our emotions and how conflicting feelings shape our lives, and he questions the nature of love and the power of belief. Also, how little control we have over what happens to us. We are possessed by nobody, not even by ourselves. So when we realize this, we seem to turn to religion, to believe that there is something in control, something we can bargain with. Because the idea of everything being somewhat incidental petrifies us and makes us panicky. As I mentioned before, The End of the Affair seems more autobiographical than the other novels Greene wrote, but the connection is the religious crisis and questioning one's fate. This is supposed to be his last Catholic novel, but I think others he wrote later can also be considered somewhat Catholic, dealing with faith and morality as defined by Christian religion. There are a couple of adaptations of The End of the Affair that I have seen. The 1955 film, which falls a bit short in its interpretation, in spite of good actors involved. I think the 1999 adaptation with Julianne Moore and Ralph Fiennes did a better job with transferring the book's mood. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transform into hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A naturally tan hide I buy from a tanner in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so the top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First I designed the cover, and for this I used this painting of a couple during the London Blitz, looking over the city, nervously combing the sky with searchlights, expecting the worst, but hoping, having faith, it all will end well. This is the back with the blurb, and inside front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather-bound hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available access to leather and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend $100 but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel. And for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. And one more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze, or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here. And until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.